Oh, yeah.
Bless and love, my lords. Welcome to another live interview powered by Red Lion. I'm joined this week, of course, by our co host, Dudley,
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show.
and the very talented crypto artist, Dandelion. How's it going, sir? Welcome. How are you?
Hello. I'm doing well. Nice to be here.
How do you pronounce the name? Dandelion or Dandelion is a little bit mixed. I had to check it online.
I think for me it's just like the song Dandelion. Yeah, Dandelion.
Okay, all right. Because I checked the British pronunciation, I liked it a little bit more. It was
What's the
Dandelion.
Yeah? I guess you said Dandelion. You think is the British pronunciation?
Yeah, because it has lion inside. I like it more. So, how are you? Thank you so much for coming into the show.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's just like a gentle, kind of cloudy January day in Seattle. And things have been pretty useful so far. So it's a nice day.
Thanks for agreeing to an interview after what's been a pretty wild ride this past year. Let's start talking a little bit more about you. Who is Dandelion? Let's start from the beginning.
Yeah, let's see. Well, I think there's a lot of ways to answer that question, probably. And I think that the weirdest and most genuine answer for me is that I'm kind of a mixture of four people. It's something I've been, just like really as I've been on my own journey of self-discovery, I've found that I kind of have different sides to myself, and we've got different like vibes and perspectives that sometimes harmonize and sometimes are dissonant. And I think that in a way, the NFT space has brought out like a lot of those different parts. I've got my part Dandy, that's just kind of like a sweet, curious, generative art lover. I've got my side Lion, who's kind of a little bit more on like the crypto, like investing and like technology front. My side Lee, who's probably the one who's out there just like hunting for grails as an NFT art collector. And my side Indigo, I would say, has not been as present in the NFT world, but she's cool and sure to make ripples anyway. But so there's the aspect of me where it's like these kind of different sides of myself. And then there's the aspect where it's like, what is the history and path that's brought me to this space? And, that involves kind of going through like a tech career that was a little bit more traditionally mainstream, and then just getting lured by the siren song of crypto possibility to get into the world of like DAOs and cryptocurrencies, and then most recently NFTs. So there's a lot of different threads there that you can pull on as seems right to you.
Yeah, everybody is it's very multi-layered, and I love the part that you are bringing together different parts of yourself to present your identity. I think maybe more people should think about themselves as little pieces than a big whole thing. It puts an interesting perspective. So you explained a lot, but out of curiosity, why dandelion? Why this specific flower?
Oh, well, so Dandelion actually is my legal name, but it's not my birth name. I was named Daniel by my parents. And it was a name that never really fully fit for me. And I think in part it's just because, going to elementary school, there would always be like 1 to 2 other Daniels in each class. And I think that the more I grow up, the more it's clear that I'm pretty much like a one of a kind weirdo, and so it seemed weird to me that there were just so many people with the same name. It's one of the ironies is that a dandelion is such a common flower, but such an unusual name. But it was actually during a really, really great acid trip at a dance festival that I kind of knew the name Daniel didn't work for me. And so I was going by the name Whist as like a little bit of a mysterious placeholder. And Whist was just inspired by the emotion of wistful joy, which I think is pretty moving. And I was on this acid trip and I was just kind of floating around, and I told someone, I really need to find my backpack so I can like drink a Soylent. But to find the backpack, I need to find my boots, and to find the boots, I need to figure out where I left them. And I know that this would all be so easy to do, except my thoughts keep on scattering into the wind. And the woman I was talking to just like paused and then very contemplatively said, "Oh, like a dandelion." And in that moment, it just like clicked. It was one of those like galaxy brain moments, because it's like, like dandelions. On the one hand, they are always like, I'm always saying I'll like go where the wind blows me, and they are just like going where the wind blows. But then it splits into dandy and lion, which I was already kind of starting to recognize that I wasn't just like one quote unquote individual, but I have this like side of myself that's like more playful and curious, and this side of myself that's more like determined and sharp. And the imagery of like lions had always like resonated for me. And so it just kind of coalesced, and then I was like, oh, dandelion, I think that's the right name for me. And then it was, from that point, it was like a couple of years of me slowly like growing into it before I actually like legally changed my name. And there was the moment where I started going by Dandelion at work, and the moment in which I like told my family and like friends, like, hey, I'm kind of retiring the name Daniel in favor of being Dandelion. So it was a multi-year journey that was catalyzed by a really good acid trip at a dance festival.
That's so beautiful, man. I love the name Dandelion, but now that I heard the whole story behind it, it sounds even cooler now. And as you described, the moment that it clicked all together must have been eye-opening for you, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm Dandelion now, and it's really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely a moment that stuck with me.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Most people know you, of course, now from your big collaboration with Tyler Hobbs for QQL, but we will get there. Let's start from the beginning for you. So, how did you get into generative art?
Let's see. So, how did I get into generative art? So I mean, there's always a beginning to the beginning, and so the prelude to me getting into generative art is me getting into crypto. But I'll just kind of take your prompt at face value and really start with gen art itself. And so there,
Oh no, let's go further back. How did you get in crypto and NFTs and eventually into generative art?
Okay. So going back, you can already tell from my prior story that I'm a pretty fond of psychedelics, and like drugs. Just like speaking very candidly, I love drugs. I think it's crazy that so many things are illegal when they're like, I think, so valuable for like personal and spiritual growth. And I got into crypto for that. I think the most OG reason to get into crypto is because you are on the right like cryptographers' mailing lists when Satoshi Nakamoto sends out like the Bitcoin spec and white paper. And the second most OG reason to get into crypto is that back in like 2012, if you were in college and wanted to buy acid, the Silk Road was kind of the best way to do that. And so it was one of those things where I was like, oh yeah, let's like get some Bitcoin and go and like get some acid on the Silk Road. Like, hi to the NSA who's listening. I'm sure that you have better things to do.
I always wanted to do that. I always wanted to do that. Yeah, sorry to cut in. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's so funny how that happens, and then like 4 years later, you realize like, oh God, I still have one Bitcoin left over from like back when it was worth like $12, and it was like worth a tab of acid. Now it's worth 30 grand. So that you set yourself up for good surprises in that case. But yeah, so I got into crypto really in 2012 just for the very pragmatic reason of like actually transacting using Bitcoin. And I found out about the Ethereum white paper pre-launch of Ethereum through some friends, because I was living and working in Silicon Valley at the time, and so I got really early into ETH. But two things happened. One, I went to the Ethereum conferences and I was like, these guys are too fucking weird, man. At the time, I didn't realize how weird I was, so I didn't quite fit in yet. So I thought the ETH scene was a little bit too weird. And then I did invest in the Ethereum ICO, but I did not have good key management practices, and I lost the encryption password for my pre-sale ETH wallet, and I was, as you might imagine, I was extremely butthurt at
Oh
having
my God.
lost my
How
ETH
much?
wallet.
How much? I have to ask. How much? How much ETH?
It was just under 10,000 ETH. At the time you could trade one Bitcoin
10,000
for
ETH?
2,000. A little bit under. It was like 90,
Oh
9400, I
my God.
think. Yeah, it was rough. I was really
Like a
butthurt for, like,
stab in my heart. Oh man.
4 years after that. I still have the encrypted wallet file. I just don't have the encryption passphrase I came up with. But I'm the kind of person who comes up with like 30 character long passphrases with symbols, so it's really hard to brute force. So that was a painful mistake, and it was a mistake that made me just like not want to think about anything crypto for a long time. So like I remember when ETH was like $70, I was like, I'm not going to buy ETH at $70. I like already bought so much of it at like $2. Like I refused to do it. So that was definitely a case of like cope not working out in my favor.
Cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, exactly. The cognitive dissonance was strong with that one. As you can tell from the fact that I can laugh about it now, I've kind of like worked through my feelings around that. I got into crypto very early, but then I kind of like tripped pretty bad in my execution and wallet management, and I stayed out of the space for a while. But then in 2017, it was the ICO boom, and I was working at Google at the time, and I was just really like uninspired by the vision of making this like particular like Silicon Valley megacorp ever more like effective at being a megacorp, and reading all these research projects coming out of Ethereum, MakerDAO, Augur, all this stuff. I was just really inspired by it. So I decided to jump into the crypto space, and I did that by creating this sort of like very utopian, kind of hopeful, like open source DAO project called SourceCred. And the idea with SourceCred was that we would create an algorithm that allowed you to quantitatively assess how much value people had provided to an open source project, so that it would be possible to pay them in a decentralized fashion. And the idea was that open source projects could like create their own cryptocurrencies and then pay all of their contributors in that cryptocurrency. And then open source projects would like give some of those cryptocurrencies to their dependencies, so that like all of open source would kind of get paid. And you can see here how it's got a mixture of like a really like utopian vision of like finally funding the open source commons, as well as a fair amount of like hand waving past really hard social and organizational problems. And so, like many utopian visions, it did not quite succeed in the way that I imagined it, but it did really mark my like diving fully into the crypto space. And that was a really interesting adventure, and I wound up kind of accidentally getting some like crypto liquidity from a different ICO that I like contributed to, and that left me with the spare ETH. That kind of like made up for the fact that I had lost all my ETH with the wallet mishap, and so I kind of had the spare ETH to start investing in more and weirder stuff. And so early 2021, a friend messages me and is like, "Hey, CryptoPunks, like you should get a CryptoPunk." And so I looked into it and I realized like, oh, this actually like these are the first NFTs. Like I do think this technology will matter. So I bought a CryptoPunk. Yeah, I got.
Oh wow! I didn't know you have a punk.
I have two punks actually. Yeah,
Wow.
the Punk 3370 is that first NFT that I purchased. It's a very clean-haired purple. It's a very clean purple-haired punk. At the time, I had dyed my hair purple, so it was kind of like me in punk form, And
Shadow beard, purple hair, and earring.
Yeah, I do like earrings too. Yeah, it's a nice punk.
It's a cool punk because he wears an earring, but you cannot see it.
It's an invisible earring. Yeah.
It's very cool, man. I didn't know you were a punk, and the first NFT you actually bought was a punk. Wow.
So I got my punk, and then I kind of wanted to like learn more about NFTs, and so I followed DC Investor on Twitter, and then DC started tweeting. Like I looked at his gallery, and I saw all the art blocks there. And in particular, I saw archetypes, and I was like, holy shit, these are amazing. I just loved archetypes. It just really spoke to me, I think, as like an engineer, and like the balance between order and chaos. And I've been interested in generative art actually since forever. Back when I first started programming, a lot of my first like early projects were just little generative art experiments. And so I was super inspired by archetypes. And that inspired me to start collecting art blocks. And then the more that I got into art blocks, the more I fell in love with generative art. And I felt that, it's just such a perfect match between these like digitally native assets and these digitally native art. And so that was really what put me down the gen art rabbit hole.
Wow, such a great story. Let me take you back to psychedelics now.
Mm.
You mentioned you like them and you have been using them, but you are also at the cutting edge of technology. So how does uh, these two things mix for you? And what is the sweet spot? What is the good intersection where you get advantages from using them?
Well, that's an interesting question. Um, so I think that I don't see for me like tech and psychedelics like intersecting like that directly. More so they intersect through like my like person. But I think that one of the things I've found with psychedelics is that you can get pretty good visionary insight while tripping. I do kind of believe in like magic in essence, and I think that brains can get more readily attuned to magic when on drugs. I'm thinking a little bit in my back of my mind about like Steve Jobs as kind of like a tech visionary who was also
Do
quite
you
fond of psychedelics.
subscribe to the stone ape theory?
No, what's this theory? I'm not familiar with it.
That it supports, well, in a nutshell, it says that we were monkeys and then we started eating those weird mushrooms and we started having visions and eventually we developed logic.
Um, I can't say I've thought about it enough to have like I'd probably need to like read more about it to like see what I think of it.
It's a very interesting thought. That basically they are saying that psychedelics played a very important part for us being different from animals, and they claim to answer the question of us having the logic mind like that. I was just curious if you knew about it, if you like the idea.
Yeah, I think my heuristic would be that complex outcomes usually have like complex and intersecting causes. And so I doubt that the origins of human intelligence will come down to any one thing in isolation. But I think I have a sense that like we got into this interesting like stable attractor or like positive feedback cycle where I think humans started finding each other sexy for their intelligence. And so then like the most intelligent like humans had like were more attractive and like then tended to have more kids and like tie this into the way that like people tend to find sense of humor to be one of the most attractive things in potential partners, which is like that's interesting. You wouldn't necessarily expect humor to be so important. But I think that probably there's just like lots of different reasons and different things that came together. And I would totally believe that mushrooms were a part of it.
Yeah, I'm reading all the recent studies on psychedelics, and it's all very good stuff that is coming out, and I'm very curious now to grow my own mushrooms. So this is what I will try to do in 2023. It's been 10 years since I last experimented with this stuff, so
Oh,
I'm
yeah, that's a
excited
that's a
for
fun
this.
project for sure.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I'm
there's a lot of
curing my
satisfaction
trauma
in
with mushrooms. Let's see how it goes.
it.
All right, let me take you back now. You said you started interacting with this investor on Twitter, and you saw his collection, which is really impressive. And yeah, you started getting into generative art. So, what was the next step since that?
Let's see. I mean, from archetypes, what was the next step? The next step was just like really connecting with the community. Going to Marfa for the first time, getting to know the artists, building friendships with just like many of the like they're just such like awesome humans in the space, like Tyler and Dimitri and Eric being people who like come to mind. And yeah, I think that it's like sort of like the art and the quality of the humans in the space and the quality of the vibes in the space all really go hand in hand. Uh, yeah, I think, and then just like getting to like build like a bigger collection and like getting like having meridians drop and being around for the meridian drop and being able to pick up like meridian 801, like kind of starry night meridian was really special. So yeah.
Yeah, Art Blocks has created something really, really unique and an amazing art movement. Before Art Blocks, nobody, or at least very, very few people cared about generative art. So how was this whole experience for you being at the core of something artistic being created, like a new art movement being born? How did it feel for you as an artist, living it firsthand?
Well, it's extremely exciting, and I think it's like I think that for me, if I look at what do I find inspiring about the crypto space and the Web3 space, I think, and it's funny to be talking about this at this moment in like early 2023, and we've just had like the FTX debacle unfold, and I think that people are pretty pessimistic and like the sort of the like crypto is nothing but scams perspective is kind of reigning looking
It's
pretty
old
strong right
news
now.
by now. Now we are in bull market again.
Yeah, I guess we are. We're in a little bull again. That's a good point. But I think that for me, on a structural level, like I think that we're seeing technology getting society being reshaped by technology in a sort of like printing press esque inflection point, where the means of communication have radically changed, and economics and society and policy and power haven't quite caught up with that yet. And I think that in the future, right now, our political systems, our social systems are running on, basically like paper written like rules, by systems that were like developed with the best technology and game theory of the 18th century. And it feels pretty clear to me that like something like DAOs, something like software mediated organizations and like protocols are the future of organization and collaboration. And I think that may take a long time. That'll probably be a multi-generational thing to unfold with lots of like trials and struggles and tribulations along the way. But I think it's a pretty inspiring vision, and this vision of like having more of an open source society and having like open source governments and such. And I think part of what I find really inspiring about the Web3 like art space and the generative art space, is that I think that great shifts in human like consciousness and society tend to be accompanied by, and in some ways like foreshadowed by, artistic movements. You think about the Renaissance as like an artistic movement that really like foreshadowed like the Enlightenment and the shape of things to come for Western society writ large. And the fact that generative art is taking the like transformative power and potential of the digital and of the computer and using that to unlock human creativity in a way that makes new art, and the fact that that like intersects so well with the medium of NFTs, it just feels really significant to me. It feels to me like this moment in history when like autoglyphs and fidenzas and squiggles and ringers are getting minted, is going to be one of those like seminal moments in the development of culture that gets remembered for a very long time to come. And so I just kind of like, I think this is where like Cosimo de Medici, like as a character, is like the right metaphor, and how exciting is it to be here at this like baby like genesis moment of, I think, a big like turning point in art and society, and to be able to like play around, to be able to pal around with the artists, to be able to like throw your own ideas into the mix and create new things. Yeah, I think it's really like a privilege and like an exciting one to be around at this moment in time in this space.
Man, that's such a beautiful reply. It made me think a lot. But yeah, I completely agree. And um, being someone who is in touch with their emotional side, their computational side, and their spiritual side and you have such an experience in technology. Why do you think that in Web 2 people don't support companies or projects as much as in Web 3? People are extremely emotional about Web 3 projects where they even base their own identity on them. Why do you think is that? Why do people connect on such a deep level with Web3 projects that they don't with Web2 projects?
Well, I think that the thing that comes to my mind is I think there's a really like foundational difference between Web 2 and Web 3 around ownership, right? Like I love the little anecdote about part of the inspiration for Vitalik in creating Ethereum being his outrage that his like warlock got nerfed in World of Warcraft, right? Like Blizzard like decided, I think it was like the Siphon life spell was too strong, so they nerfed it and it like broke his build. But I grew up playing World of Warcraft, playing MMOs, and so there was this sense in which my like level 60 Night Elf Rogue was a part of my identity, and all of that labor that I had put into developing that identity wasn't really mine. It was Blizzard's, and if like I don't pay Blizzard $15 a month, then my account will just like be deactivated. And if Blizzard decides that I like violated the terms of service, they can just like remove my account. Like it wasn't actually mine. It was just like a fantasy that I was leasing from Blizzard. And now, I no longer really have that connection. Like that character is like gone. I lost the password or something. And in Web3, even though the tech is so much less mature and the experiences are less mature, in Web3, if you own something, it's actually yours, right? Like these like Fidenzas and punks that I've collected, like they'll by default they'll be mine and like tangible and still real. Intangible in an abstract sense, but abstractly tangible and real for decades to come. And I think that allows you the fact that like it's the difference. It's like the difference between going to Coachella and Burning Man. I don't know if you've been to either of these events, but if you go to Coachella, it really is a like a managed corporate experience. You buy your ticket, you show up, there are these acts, there's expensive vendors, and you are a consumer, but there's not a sense in which you own or are like creatively present in the experience. You're just there to like soak it in. And I never hear people talking about how, I had this incredible, life-changing revelation at like Coachella. Like you just go there to consume and go home. And Burning Man, in contrast, is an event where everything that happens because it was created by individual people who are just bringing their passion, whether that's like assembling like a crazy like art car in the desert or, some kind of like shower experience. The camp I went with was like, we built a giant sprung dance floor in the desert and would just like invite people to partner dancing. And I think that's like the things that are actually being created by communities, like by and with and for themselves as an act of love, is spiritually a much more powerful and much more interesting experience than showing up to consume something. And so I think that's probably like the biggest difference is that even though much like Burning Man, Web3 is like inconvenient and sometimes your stuff gets messed up and so many things can go wrong, it is actually something that everyone is participating in and co-creating rather than just passively consuming. And that leaves you with a sense of investment and a sense of ownership and a sense of real community that is lacking in Web 2.
I really like this parallel. This question, it's a recurring question. I have asked it to a lot of guests. I really enjoyed your reply. Um, how did this connection between Dandelion and Tyler Hobbs for creating QQL come about?
I had been part of the initial group of collectors who purchased the God mode Fidenza. It's Fidenza 938. And it's just like a really weird outlier Fidenza. It's simultaneously like a spiral and a micro uniform, and it's got like relaxed collision checking, and it just produced this super strange output. And we reached out to Tyler to kind of like talk about it with him and kind of get his thoughts on naming it. And so that was really like the initial connection between me and Tyler. It was through having collected this Fidenza. Bonafide Han was kind of the person who organized that group. I know he was on your show earlier. And then Tyler and I got to talking about generative art, and we were kind of comparing notes on like which projects we love. Like we both really love archetypes and particularly color palettes that Chettle chose. And so that led to the two of us just kind of vibing and like talking about art. And I had been sitting in the just like chewing in the back of my head on this idea of like what if the randomness for generative art was not coming just like totally like randomly from the blockchain? What if it were actually an intentional curatorial decision by the person minting the NFT, which I figured would make a lot of sense because these algorithms have got so much potential for expression. And that was really, really particularly inspired by Meridian 801, which I don't know how familiar you are with the Meridian algorithm, but it's one that usually produces, and I can actually, I'm wondering how I can link my little Meridian collection, because I've got it in
Just
my
DM
gallery.
it to Dudley and he will pin it up here so we can all see.
Okay, cool. I'm just gonna DM it to you because I don't know if I have Dudley's. I'm not sure.
Cool, that
Dudley's
works.
Twitter
Yeah,
account.
sure.
Cool. But the meridians usually are producing these sort of very abstract kind of striated landforms. And then there was this one meridian, 801, that just produces this like immaculate, like starry summit. It's just like a mountain under the night sky. And it's got this like gentle banding of the Milky Way. And it feels so intentional while in fact being totally accidental. Like there's no sense in which the meridian algorithm is trying to produce the Milky Way night sky. It just like happened to leave enough white space that it feels like stars. And I thought to myself, if we could have had human collectors curating outputs from the meridian algorithm, we probably could have found a lot more of these like stunningly perfect mountains that never get minted. And it's kind of the same with the God mode Fidenza. Like the probability of that one happening by chance was like something like 1 in a million. It's just like very, very shocking that it came out. It was lower than 1 in a million, but I did the math at some point. I don't have the numbers, so I won't try to make them up. And I thought that it'd be really cool to have a generative art project where you actually are choosing the outputs, but I knew that we would want it to be one where the algorithm actually has got enough range of possibility to like really make that an interesting exploration. And so about a year before QQL launched, this was in October of 2021, I DM'd Tyler just being like, hey, Tyler, I kind of have this weird idea. Like, what if it were a generative art project where the minter of the NFT chooses the art that gets generated? And Tyler, like at the time, was like, oh yeah, this is like, I get a lot of people giving me ideas, but this is a cool one. I'll think about it. And then the next day I hear back from him being like, okay, I've thought about this for a night. I like it even more. Like, let's actually do this. And so we started having like weekly calls from then and just kind of slowly built up the project together.
Oh, that's so cool, and it provides such an insight on how it all came to be. Okay, I apologize in advance for my next question because this is completely my opinion and my analysis of QQL. When I found QQL, I was like, oh my God, this is a masterpiece. From what I know about art and generative art, I don't code myself, but from like an execution standpoint, the website, everything, all the mechanics were perfect, and I was like, yeah, this is beautiful. This is what a masterpiece looks like. But in my mind, and I'm sorry if that's not true, but I have to ask since I have the opportunity, right? Um, it's a really beautiful work because it addresses so many questions about making and dropping art and delivering generative art in very elegant ways. Because I've witnessed firsthand all the discussion on Twitter. How should the drop be? What is the price? Should it be slow? Should it be fast? How can you make it that rarity doesn't matter, but everybody means something that they like? So I felt like every step of the way of the process was answering a question with a very elegant way, sort of like creating a blueprint. Is that in any way true, or is it just in my imagination?
So to rephrase the question,
Yeah.
can you give me there was a lot there. Can you give me like the one
Yeah.
sentence version of the question?
So for example, in every step of the way, QQL feels like it's addressing a question and solves it very eloquently and in sort of like showing a bright example for the space on how to do this or that. Is that true, or it never occurred to you when you guys were making it?
I would say that a lot of it was intentional, and a lot of it was the result of, I kind of mentioned that like dialogue that Tyler and I were having, and a lot of it was a dialogue about, like, for example, like rarity and floors, and what does it mean to have a floor. And one thing that he and I both agreed on is that we think we think that the kind of like highest like tier in what makes generative art like incredible is emergence. And so if you look at like what if you look at some generative art projects where what makes the best pieces is that there was sort of like the artist made a decision to like have a flag, and like the flag is okay, like if this flag is set, then make a really cool one, and if the flag isn't set, then like make a normal one. Like, not to like say that's not like a valid or like beautiful or interesting approach to making art, because it is. But I think that for us, we were really interested in the question of like, what if there's no artificial scarcity? What if it's just about the like beauty and possibility of the algorithm? And so I would say that that was like part of the concept that we were exploring, is like, what if there's a generative art project in which there's no real sense of rarity, because like all the features are just like equally possible if somebody wants to use them, and then what will actually make a piece rare? And I would say I think that that was like part of the core concept, but it also informed a lot of the decisions that we made in actually tuning the algorithm. Because with a traditional long form generative art project, you need to spend a lot of your time worrying about the floor and sort of saying, okay, what is the worst possible output that this algorithm can make? And how can I make sure that that worst possible output isn't too bad, so that I won't have like an awful or like boring floor? And with QQL, we could say, okay, we don't need to worry about the worst possible output, because people just won't mint it. And indeed, with some low frequency, the QQL algorithm just like outputs an empty canvas. And that would be like a pretty bad thing if the algorithm was just randomly minting, because nobody would want to just get the like empty canvas. I mean, maybe some people would, but if there were two, you really wouldn't want either one. But we could kind of afford not to worry about it. And instead, you wind up with rarity being this really like emergent, like subjective characteristic. I personally think the rarest QQL, and I'll DM this one too, is QQL 47, which is the lizard. I call it the QQ lizard, because it's in terms of like statistical or trait, it's not anything special. It's just another QQL. But you look at it, and it really looks like it's this smiling like gecko kind of staring at you, and it's just a completely like weird emergent phenomenon that the algorithm produced, this like gecko in profile. So I think that on the one hand, a lot of the concepts were quite intentional, to like play off of this core artistic idea that Tyler and I were sharing. But then there are also a lot of things that like came together kind of organically, like the idea for us to let a portion of, part of our thesis is that with this algorithm, everyone who mints one is kind of like co-creating the collection, and the parametric artists who are finding the individual seeds are kind of like artists alongside me and Tyler. And so we set this policy where a portion of the resale royalties for every QQL are going to the parametric artist. And that was something that we kind of like it was actually an idea that Tyler had at the last minute that we like kind of threw in there. So some of it was like envisioned together from the beginning. Some of it just kind of came together at the last moment. And I think that's part of how art is. It's just like sometimes art wants to be, and it'll just like find its way into the world.
Yeah, it definitely felt like an intelligent design. So I was, as someone who also creates concepts, I was very intrigued with it. I was like, yeah, man, this is answering this question, this is answering that question. So it spoke to me like that. So I definitely wanted to ask you about that. Um, Nowadays, we see, especially since 2023 started and late 2022, we see a lot of AI, and the it's basically the AI is taking over a lot of tasks, and there is a debate, I guess, if you ask an AI to write a script and then the script is good and you curate it, I don't know, and you actually mint that script. Is it art? Is it does the artist matter in this case? What is the difference if they wrote the code themselves? So there is a little bit of a debate that is coming into the generative art space about that. So what do you think? Is it the person who creates the code who is the artist, or the person who actually delivers the output, or how is it in your mind?
You know, I think that, like, if I were to try to come up with a definition of what do I think art is, I would say something like art is the phenomena where we invest like external or inanimate objects with human like intention and subjectivity and vibes and beauty. And I think that can be a very expansive definition, right? Like art can be me like with like a little like knife kind of like carving something into the side of a tree. Art can be somebody with like a paintbrush, like putting strokes on a canvas. It can be, Dmitry Cherniak like poring over code and coming up with like a beautiful system. And so I think that in the case of the AI like generated art, there's a lot of different layers of human intention that have gone into producing it. There's all of the art that composed the training data and like defined the styles that are going to be like reproduced and imitated. There is the work in like coding and developing the model, and then there is the work in like sifting through the outputs. And it's kind of similar to like how photography is an art form, where it's just like choosing the perfect moment to capture, and that like active choice is the art, even if the thing that is being photographed wasn't created by the artist. Um, so yeah, I think that AI generated art totally can be art, and I think that the depending on the way it was created, it might be more the coders who created the model if they were like putting specific intention into that model, or it might be the person who's like doing the prompt engineering or like sifting through all the outputs. So yeah, I'm kind of like I think that there are probably a lot of different interpretations that are all going to be kind of valid in thinking about who is the artist and what is the art with AI art.
It's going to be super interesting for sure. I was asking it the other day to write me something like a Fidenza or something like Spiegel, and it was saying, "Oh, I cannot do this exactly as you're asking me, but here is how you can do it." And it showed me the code, and then it was like, "Change this, change that." So this is incredible for even for people who actually want to get into it, or why not for people to do it without knowing how to code? I really don't know the answer to that. But what we will see this year coming out on on every field of technology, it's going to be mind blowing, and I'm really excited personally for it. So a lot of people are a bit skeptical or afraid, but I don't know. I'm really excited.
Hmm.
Um, You also have a remarkable collection as a collector. Um, as I say, we don't trust artists who don't collect. What are the artists that shaped you and inspired you, and what are the artists that you love to collect?
Let's see. I'd have to say that probably Tyler is the artist who I find most inspiring, and in particular, getting to work with him on QQL, and I would definitely say he was the like driving force with the aesthetics and the style of the algorithm. But I got a lot of chances to contribute my own ideas and like some of my own style and like working with him on creating it. And that was just like a really inspiring act. I would say other artists who I really like respect and appreciate include like MP Cause, who created Chimera and Tectonics. I love Matt Delarier's work with meridians and subshapes in particular. I'm really fond of Chettel's work on archetypes. I'm really fond of like Dmitry Cherniak's range of work. Aaron Penne and Emily Shea are two other people who really come to mind. Also, Luke Shannon. I love the opera. So yeah, I would say like there are so many great artists in the generative space. I also am like quite fond of Anticyclone. There's just so much good stuff happening.
Earlier, you mentioned source cred, and I wanted to jump back to it at this point because I find the concept very remarkable, and I'm wondering why isn't it being used more widely, and how do you guys measure what you're measuring?
So with SourceCred, the idea was we would take a very data-driven approach to analyzing the work that people have done on open source projects, and it was actually the algorithm was inspired by Google PageRank. So PageRank was the original algorithm kind of powering Google search, and it was based on the kind of intuitive idea that a website is credible if it is linked to by other credible websites. And so, like like Art Blocks is a credible website if tons of other like websites, like like art websites or news websites or such are linking to it. And then if Art Blocks links to some other website, that other website is in turn seen as kind of credible because Art Blocks pinged it. And so in the case of source cred and open source, it was like, okay, like a pull request is considered important if lots of GitHub issues reference it, or if other pull requests reference it, or if the code that it created got like used a lot by other pieces of code. And so it was a very like tech centric approach to thinking about the value of contributions to projects. And I think that what I was underestimating at the time was just how much it really is about like these are human organizations, not just things of code. And ultimately having such a like outcome measuring approach wound up being kind of easy to game. You can bake like lots of little pull requests, you can make lots of like dummy GitHub issues. And in contrast, like a lot of the most valuable labor in projects is not actually like just like writing the code, but keeping people aligned, figuring out the vision, keeping the vibes good, recruiting people to the space. And so I think that ultimately like why SourceGrid didn't really like succeed and have a huge impact. And it did get used by some pretty cool organizations like MakerDAO used SourceGrid for several years. But I think that ultimately the fatal flaw was this overemphasis on quantitative and technological analysis of work, and comparatively like less deep thought going into the social dynamics. And so you wind up with this thing where like, let's say, you have your key person in your community who maybe at this point they're not coding a lot, but they are like talking to everyone, answering all their questions, bringing new people to the project. Like it was just hard to measure and value that kind of labor. And so something I think about a lot because I do think that we're still pretty immature in the Web3 space in terms of being able to run DAOs, being able to run organizations. And I think we need better tools for thinking about compensation, for thinking about how to like distribute like status and like authority within these Web3 organizations. But if I were to approach this again, I'd probably go something a little bit more like the world of NFTs, where it's all about provenance and it's all about like who's like valued directly by like other collectors or other stakeholders, and less of just trying to quantitatively analyze things, if that makes sense.
What do you value the most in the NFT space, and what do you hate the most?
What do I value the most in this space? I mean, I don't know if it's like too generic to say the art but I really value that we're creating like this beautiful like art with really cool provenance. And I think, I think that one of the things that's most noteworthy in a piece is like how much does it inspire others. So we can see that like autoglyphs were very inspirational because they led the creation of so many other projects. And then I see with like, fidenzas, for instance, seeing that then the Cryptodes project has got the toadenzas really shows like, okay, yeah, people are inspired by this project. People want to like remix it in other places. I think there's also like originality. Like I really like Death Beef's work. He's not as well known, but the fact that he did everything just using like a C compiler to create this like super minimal dependency audiovisual art, super cool. What do I hate the most? It's an interesting question. I don't spend nearly as much time thinking about what do I hate, which is maybe a blind spot for me. I guess I would like like I hate the scammers. I hate all of the ways in which like Web3 like empowers some of the best of human creativity, but also empowers a lot of our worst behaviors. So as somebody who really does believe in the visionary and like transformative and like radical potential of these decentralized technologies, I hate that it's people like Sam Bankman-Fried who are setting like the broader like image of what Web3 is or what crypto is, rather than people like Eric Snowfro or Tyler. So I think maybe that's probably the biggest thing. Is we need to like figure out how to stop getting misled by the scammers and shills and throwing all our money at these broken ventures.
But do you think collectively we are still a little bit immature?
Yeah, for sure. But also, like collectively as the human race, we're still massively immature. So that's like not even necessarily a special to Web3. It's just like where we are collectively as a species, I think.
But especially in Web3, probably.
Yeah, maybe.
Recently, you and Tyler posted that you are taking a little break from social networks to work on some projects. Could you give us some spoilers?
That was Tyler in particular posting that. He's kind of like gone in his art cocoon, and I would certainly not spoil any art of Tyler's. That's not my vibe.
Okay, it was just fishing there. I'm curious as to how you think about postmodernism, which was really about acknowledging that there are all these things in the world that go beyond art for art's sake. There are people who would argue that art's job in a time like this is really to grapple with all of the social, political, and existential issues that surround us right now. Would you claim that most generative art, maybe your generative art, is art for art's sakes? How do we justify or explain what we are making when the traditional art world has, in many ways, moved on?
Well, let's see. I would say first, I don't think that I'm really like the best person to be giving you like really like deep critique on like art theory, because it's not it's not someplace that I'm like super well read or studied. Um, yeah, I think I can kind of like I could probably comment a little bit more on like postmodernism, more in like a general philosophical sense than in like a sense of like art history in particular, if you want. But I think that as far as like art postmodernism as an art movement, you might find other people who are better equipped to speak about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure. Sorry about that. It was one of my written questions. But yeah, um, you're right. Dudley, I don't know if you would like to jump in, if you have any questions. And at this point, if anybody from the audience would like to ask something, please raise your hands, and we will pass on the mic.
Yeah, I would like to ask. Imagine someone from the audience maybe is trying to get into Gen Art. So, what would you recommend would be the best approach, best first steps to go for it? Do you need to have some coding background, or you just need to start to learn to code at least some basics?
Well,
would you how to start if I want to be Gen artist next year, for example?
I want to snarkily say empirically it's a good idea to get into Tyler Hobbs's DMs if you can, but that's just me being sassy.
That's the shortcut.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like I would say, for me, I'm still like immature as a generative artist in my own right. It's something I've had a lot of interest in, but I've definitely, by virtue of collaborating with Tyler, I've like had a chance to like, create a level of art that I'm not yet capable of on my own. And it's definitely something that I'm like myself diving into. I think that obviously if you want to be a generative artist, then you do need to know how to code. But in the process of learning programming, I think that creating art can be a really like engaging way of doing that because it does give you such like fast and immediate feedback. And for me, as I mentioned, a lot of my like early programming work was creating these little generative art systems. So I think that definitely like if you already know how to code, then probably diving in with like processing and there's lots of like I would actually recommend like Tyler's essays because he's written a lot on creating generative art and then just kind of exploring with what resonates for you. I know that for me I've got a particular theme that I want to explore in generative art, which is the beauty of like natural and living systems and the beauty of ecologies and the beauty of ecosystems. So a lot of my experimentation has involved in trying to create little renderings of like microbes and little like living systems with microbes interacting. I think that with art, probably finding a direction that feels fun for you, finding a direction where you can kind of make things that are imperfect and a little bit broken, but each one is a little bit more of a stretch and each one like tries some new technique you haven't played with before and gives you a broader like palette. And just taking a very like incremental, very experimental approach would be my recommendation. And find a way in which it feels like fun, find a way in which it feels vibey, because I think that is what tends to produce engaging art.
All right. What are you bringing for us in 2023? What are your plans and what do you have? Whatever you can share with us for 2023. What should we expect?
Yeah, I really, I would say that ever since I learned to program, one of my core fascinations with programming has been the ability to create something from nothing, the ability to like kind of magically, like it almost feels like magic in Harry Potter. You utter these like special words, and then you like have something that just like emerged from your mind. And I have been playing with the idea of building little systems that uh, explore evolution, explore the like creativity and possibility of biological systems. And so for in this year, one of my big intentions is to create some art that is really like reaching for that sense of wonder of like, wow, like biology can do so many things and you can have all these little like creatures with their own like histories and their own life cycles and their own interactions. And I want to see whether like in the tool set of generative art, whether I can create something that really like evokes the wonder of the natural world. So that's the main project I'm going to be pushing on.
All right, I'm very excited about it. Let me ask you: do you know what art code is?
Art code, is that like ArtX code?
No, it's Art Code is our little magazine which we have. It's a generative art magazine, and every issue has a unique cover which is on chain and it's generative art. Basically, we set up a full platform just to just to launch this magazine. But anyway, I would like to invite you for an interview, or if you want to make any kind of content with us about generative art. you are more than welcome and for sure invited, and it would be an absolute pleasure. Because yeah, we are focusing on generative art and content about that. And I think from our interview today, there's probably a lot of value that you could add into that, or maybe just an interview. We will see.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if you have any closing remarks.
It's been fun getting to chat with you and answer your questions. I don't think I have any more closing thoughts other than thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for coming in, and it's been an absolute pleasure to get to know you. I got very interested about what we were talking earlier about the psychedelics, and you gave us great insight to your work with Tyler and QQL, and I look forward to having another chat with you in the future.
Awesome. Sounds good.
So we will be back tomorrow with another live interview. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a good evening. Bye bye.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Take care.